might see this when you're traveling along Indiana Avenue or around IUPUI's campus. But how many of you remember Lockefield Gardens when it was a community within a community? A place where almost every person in the black community wanted to be. Hi, I'm Brad Sims, and today we're going to take a look at the old Lockefield Gardens and the impact that it had on the black community. The Lockefield Garden Apartment Project was one of America's first federally funded and supervised housing projects. In fact, Lockefield served as a model for those that followed. The plans were distributed to other housing agencies across the country. At an approximate cost of $3 million, the project consisted of 748 units in 24 reinforced concrete buildings with brick exterior walls. Large windows provided ample light, and all apartments had cross ventilation. No room lacked an outside exposure or faced a wall. Modern plumbing, electric lights, electric stoves, and refrigerators were provided in each apartment. Community facilities included laundries, social rooms, storage space, and incinerators. Although Lockefield was completed in June 1937, it was not open until February 16, 1938. The delay was caused by moisture damage resulting from structural cracks in the walls. The rents were originally set as follows. A 3-room apartment would cost $20 to $23 a month. A 4-room apartment went for $25 to $28. A penthouse apartment for around $26. And the group houses anywhere from $27 to $30 a month. To qualify as a Lockefield resident, the renter had to have an income sufficient to pay the rent and to provide for other living expenses, but not to exceed 5 times the rent of the Lockefield Garden Apartments. As originally constructed, the Lockefield Garden Apartments project occupied an area bound by Indiana Avenue on the north, Blake Street on the east, North Street on the south, and Locke Street on the west. Of the 363 residential structures that were demolished in 1935 to make way for the Lockefield project, only one house was described as being in good condition at the time. The buildings were leveled and a superblock was created. The only building left standing was the 1879 William D. McCoy Public School number 24. School number 24, along with a variety store, nursery school, fish market, barber shop, and beauty salon, helped make Lockefield a community within a community.
See, everything in Lockefield was modern, and people would move out of houses that weren't modern into houses that were. And of course, when Lockefield first opened up, it was a beautiful place. They had the drapes and curtains, and it was just a beautiful place.
The grass, the buildings, and the way they were arranged so that you could see just about from one end to the other without being shattered out, by a building. You could almost catch through from Locke Street to Blake Street, or from Blake Street to Locke Street, or from Indiana Avenue. After you come up from the underpass at the office, you could see clean down to School 24. You could see when the children were getting out. If you lived high or low, you'd know when your child was coming out of school, and you could meet him halfway or her halfway without any problem. There were no high trees.
It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I didn't think that it was possible for anything to be that. I hadn't seen anything that nice because I hadn't started working in any of the finer homes in Indianapolis until I had gone there. And here was hardwood floors and bath and stove and ice box. We didn't have anything to put in it when we moved, but gradually we did get furniture. But to this day, I don't think there's ever anything as beautiful as Lockefield was when we first moved in. And it was a haven for some very, very fine people.
It was nice because the school was right in Lockefield, and the kids, they had their kindergarten was down in the first building on the opposite side, in fact, underneath the Lockefield office. And the school only went to the 6th grade. However, during those times, every building had a little sandbox and swings or something for the small kids to play in. And then there was the big playground area, which belonged to the school. We had the supervision. Now, we lived on the 3rd floor, and we could turn our children loose and put them downstairs and let them play. You didn't have to worry about anybody bothering anybody, or it just was a nice, safe, clean place. Mr. Bruce was the janitor at that time, and he came through and he just made sure that everything was just kept nice and neat, and it stayed that way for years. In fact, the whole time that we were there, Lockefield was very nice. It was just in the later years that it kind of changed.
Playground area, there was no bicycles on the playground area, and when a bicycle was ridden, it was taken away from the child, and the parent had to come and talk with whoever had taken the bike, and of course it was an adult, so that the children were safe. It was a safe place to grow up. And I praise the Lord for being able to live in a safe place, because today when you go and you look at some of the apartments and some of the complexes, it isn't safe for children. We lived in what was known as a group house. Of today you call them townhouses. All of the group houses had backyards, and any time in the spring of the year they would have backyard more or less competition, who had the prettiest backyard. And that meant the people would get out early in the spring and plant their flowers. Children were encouraged to stay off the grass. The area, the walking area outside of the mall, were many neighborhood stores, and this is where the people went to shop. But as far as Lockefield itself is concerned, for the blacks in those days, it was one of the best places to live. You had hot and cold running water, you had steam heat, and I think if you talk to enough people who lived in Lockefield, they'll tell you they've never been warm since.
And it amazed me at the structure of the building and everything, and when I moved in there, we had ice box for where I came from. But there we had refrigerators, electric stove, hardwood floors, and whatnot. And I really was amazed.
I remember a discipline and a nice place to live, where you had nice families, where we had 748 units on 22 acres of land, and in each one of those entrances in Lockefield was like another community.
My school years, I lived in Lockefield in the group houses, and it was beautiful. I'll never forget it as long as I live. And it hurt me when it was torn down, but it's still home to me. And it was so beautiful because everybody was so friendly. We didn't have to lock our doors. If our mother went away, someone else took care of you. And if you were wrong, you got a whipping twice, you know. But it just, to me, it made a better woman out of me.
One of the things that I remember about Lockefield is nobody locked their doors. No, because somebody, a neighbor, might need a cup of sugar, a little flour, maybe even a cup of milk. Another thing I remember is the profound respect that we children, and this is carried over into our adulthood, respect that we had for older people. And one of the things, again, that we try to do is promote that. There's a lot of wisdom in getting older, as most of the people that you probably talk to could attest to.
The grounds were well kept. There was grass. There was a beautiful promenade where that you could walk in the afternoons. There were benches where the kids could sit and study or draw. And then the sand lot, where our famous basketball player Oscar Robinson came up, was on the far end. The McCoy School was also there. And that was a school that was registered by a black cowboy back in the early 1900s. and he dedicated some of his money to see that this school came about for blacks. I think it's awful hard to describe, but the trees lined on both sides as a beautiful background with shade, but not too much shade. It allowed the plants, the flowers, the evergreens that were on the side by the walks to come along where that you could see and be seen. It allowed the students and those going to school a place where that they could meet and have a lot of fun and play games together. The children could roll wheels, hoops, ride tricycles and other things up and down the wide walks. The benches were stationary. They were on iron, of course, with backs, and they were stationary. And many a picnic was given by the individual families without ever leaving the grounds of Lockefield.
You know, Lockefield Gardens held many social events, but the event that was the biggest and is still with us today is the annual Dust Bowl tournament. In 1946, James Bruiser Gaines moved to Lockefield. He and his family lived in the group houses near the playground. During this time, Bruiser noticed that the neighborhood kids seemed to have time on their hands and enjoyed the common interest of playing basketball. Thus, the Dust Bowl tournament was born. In the summer of 1946, the Dust Bowl was started with 4 teams, and the winner of the tournament received a $3 award provided by Bruiser himself. The runner-up team received a chocolate cake baked by Bruiser's wife.
I consider the Dust Bowl tournament mine. I'm not being presumptuous or anything. The Dust Bowl tournament, the name, I named it because under the baskets we had 2 big holes, and when it rained, I'd get the wheelbarrow and we had horseshoe pits, and we'd have to get the dirt and wheel it, put it in a wheelbarrow and take and fill up the holes so the kids could play on it. It wasn't blacktop at that time. The basketball court wasn't blacktop.
Every day we'd have to come out and sprinkle it down so that we might be able to play on it. But a fellow by the name of Mr. Temple, who lived across the street from Lockefield, he saw our plight and what struggle we were having, and he worked for the city in the asphalt division. And each time that he would have some asphalt left, he would come over and lay it out on our basketball court until finally, eventually, we got asphalt on our court. Although we did have our first Dust Bowl tournament there.
First tournament we had 6 teams, and most of them were made up of young men that lived in this area. Not too many from the outside area. That means we had that many, and it just growed and growed each year. We run 6-minute to 8-minute quarters, 4-minute timeouts. I kept the time by my wristwatch. I had no stopwatch, or I had no horn. I just had one basketball. I think I bought that. At that time, I had no sponsors. But as the tournament growed, I become to have sponsors. I had one sponsor that started with me almost right, just about 48, and that was Joe Stewart. At that time, he was the president and owner of Stewart's Funeral Home. And later on, as I become a police officer, I become assigned to the Power Club, and they started supporting my program. And from that, the boys that come from out of state, all over Indiana and Kentucky, they would carry this back to their schools or their homes, and they would ask me how I would set up a tournament. I would tell them it would be very nice. It wouldn't cost them anything if they kept it down and done like I did. Well, I didn't have no expense, so I charged no fee. The ground wasn't rented. It was approved that I could use it for this period. And so after 26 years of running the Dust Bowl, where I refereed all the games with help, not by myself, I thought it was time to quit, and I turned it over to Ralston Evans, called Buddy Q. He's deceased at this time, but he was a fine right arm. I had plenty young men that went on to college from the Dust Bowl. The most famous one was Oscar Robinson. I had to run him off the court many many a morning, 2 or 3 o'clock, he's still bouncing that ball. And I'd take my BB gun and shoot it and hit the backboard. He'd hear the clink clink, and he'd know that mean he should have been gone 2 hours ago.
My only regret that I would like to say at this time, I had a young man named, he was a little scrawny, little bitty thing, about 9 years old. He was down on the bench, wanting to play bad. And I had some boys, the C boys, I thought was much better than him. And Jimmy Gaines said, why don't you put Oscar in on there? I thought, oh, he's too small. And I didn't. I hope today that Oscar Robertson forgives me for that, because I overlooked him at that time. But I want him to really know that one mistake I made the whole time I was there.
The first tournament, I put up $3 for first prize, and my wife baked a cake, and that was it. And it was kind of hard getting trophies. It wasn't much money, you know, like back in there, it wasn't much money.
And as it grew, people began to, sell their little wares. They would sell pop and hot dogs and just, everything that, within reason. They would even barbecue. And it became a thing that every year they would ask, it's about time for the tournament. So the time really was in August of each year. And you would be surprised that the people at Lockefield playground and around would be just packed. And like he has said, there was never any trouble at that time, never any fights. And that, in a crowd of people, somebody's bound to get out of hand. But we never had that problem at all. And I'll tell you, this was so amazing. I go to the National Baptist Sunday School and BTU Congress every year. And I went last year to Dallas, Texas. And we have courtesy cars taking us back to the airplane. And the lady that was driving our courtesy car, we were having a hard time getting through the traffic. I said, what's going on? And she said, oh, that's the Dust Bowl. She said, we have that every year. Everybody waits for that. So I said, the Dust Bowl in Dallas, Texas? And so she said, yes. I said, well, I have to tell you that my husband started the Dust Bowl. She said, well, isn't that amazing? She said, we have the Dust Bowl, and it is a top thing here. And so I want you to know that it's as far as Dallas, Texas, and still going.
Lockefield was a fascinating place in which to live. In the evening, one could hear music floating from the windows, whether it be Flo Garvin, Dudley Storm, or some aspiring musician. Lockefield was Marie Evans' renowned poet-to-be, Lionel Artis, Fred Ransom, Jimmy Hill, Reginald Bruce, and all the people who worked to keep Lockefield going. Lockefield was a POW club, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and many other activities. Lockefield also helped make Indiana Avenue and the surrounding area what it was, the Lido Theater, Sunset and Cotton Clubs. And who could forget the Chew and Chat, Jew Betsy's, the Kincaid Hole, and of course, the Walker Theater. Lockefield was Jimmy Smith, a grocer with style, Mila Kino, sending a young man off to the Army with a party. Lockefield was Hallie Bryant, the League Brothers, Teddy Boyd, Bill Garrett, Ronald Crow, Oscar and Flap. It was Anderson Grigley, Cricket, Little Jug, Double Time, Slick, Long John, and all the people who played in the Dust Bowl tournament. Lockefield was a stroll along a magnificent mall, green, snow white, or leaf covered. School 24 and its principal, Mrs. Allen, and some of her staff, Mrs. Wilhite, Mrs. Page, Mrs. Kurt, and of course, Mrs. Beecham, Mrs. Simpson, and Mrs. Peters, just to name a few. Lockefield was not just brick and mortar, trees and grass. It was also about a very special people who lived there. For without them, Lockefield would just be another place to live.
There was plenty to do in Lockefield, but you were surrounded by things to do. The Walker Theater, the Walker Casino, where dances were held for the adult and teenage dances. Then there was the Lido Theater right down the street. there were special days like Wednesday. The price would be, I think it was 10 cents.
Even the surroundings, there was nice people. I can remember the sunset, and I saw all the fine entertainers. I was standing shoulder to shoulder with Nat King Cole at the sunset, and it was hot in there, and I think if a fire had broken out, 1,000 people would have been killed. But it was a place to go. And there wasn't any of this that you see now. Even the Lido, 10 cents to get in, was a nice place to go in the Walker. That was the inn.
There was a Girl Scout troop. There was Boy Scouts. There were Cubs. There were Brownie groups, and there were the Campfire Girls. All of those were activities for the young people if they chose to participate. Now, at the school, there was also what was known as the Girl Reserves, or those who would more or less be community helpers. There's just so much that it's really, well, it was just a community within itself. Everything that you would ask for to help young people grow was there.
Lockefield became a source of pride in the Indianapolis black community. The project permitted blacks and low-income groups to live in comfort and to retain their self-respect. To live in Lockefield was considered to be an honor. Prospective tenants were checked for credit ratings, past relations with landlords, and family history. Each home of the prospective tenants had been visited at least once. Lockefield became a showplace in the black community. Its location on Indiana Avenue, the center of black social and cultural life, helped generate many activities there. Although Lockefield has not survived as it was originally completed, it remains a symbol of the hope and progress of that first generation of Indianapolis blacks which took residency there. That generation enjoyed the improved quality of life offered by the apartments, the playgrounds, the mall, and the sense of community at Lockefield Gardens.
One reason why we used to make visits at the tenants' home, I mean at the people who put in applications, we'd have to go to the house and see what kind of housekeeping they had, and how they, whether the house was substandard or standard. And after a few years, we discontinued that.
Didn't have the security. That's 748 apartments, and like I said before, and in each apartment there was maybe 3, 5, some places 8 kids. And during that time that Lockefield was about to close down, those kids were up, or either different families that moved in there. And they should have put more security, maybe 3 to 4 special policemen or city policemen to walk it all the time until the people, and then it's because it's a pretty tough job for a house manager to run a place without security anymore.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that hit Lockefield hardest, though, but after World War II, is a lot of black people, and I know my father, for one, he started working at Lily's. Well, we had to move away from there because, remember, Lockefield came under the HUD, which is a government program. And so if you, no matter how well, if you did real well financially, you had to move. You had no choice because you would go over their guidelines. And what happened as our living went up and our way of life expanded and got better as far as salaries and living conditions as black people, what happened was that the cutoff point was really relegated down to the lower income people. And
the decline of Lockefield was that it was a profit-making apartment building. They were paying the bills, and the government didn't want that. It was set up for a low-income, poverty-stricken. That's the way the title come out when they clamped down on the people that were paying their rent and keeping their property up and keeping their children up. They put them out. They investigated their jobs and found out that they were making $1 over what they were supposed to be making, and they put them out. And they started putting welfare people in there, and they weren't used to chastising their children or taking care of adequate their apartment.
Everything was just beautiful, beautiful yards, beautiful tenants, neighbors, and we all looked out for each other. We had a beautiful education system, beautiful pal club that we all worked together.
It was a beautiful place to be. We were there. It was had been built 3 years when we moved there, and was brand new, and it was so beautiful, and all the people, we just had clubs, and the beauty of Lockefield, the grass, and then how everybody respected each other. There was never a lot of fights among us, you know. We all got along very well. It was just like a big family, you know.
Although I never lived in Lockefield myself, my parents and many other people did. Lockefield provided safe, humane, sophisticated living for its tenants. It was truly a community within a community. It provided that and a whole lot more. You know, maybe if we take a look at a success of the past, we might be able to solve some of the problems of the future.